Hello, listeners, and welcome to this week's episode of the Cult Vault. I'm your speaker, Casey, and today I have an interview for you that touches upon the dangers of online movement, the potential harm influencers can have, and the damage that the YouTube algorithm can inflict, encouraging vulnerable people to go down rabbit holes into potentially dangerous content. For anyone who missed my update episode, I am soon going to be going on maternity leave. During this time, I will only be uploading weekly interviews and re-releasing old episodes from the early archives of the podcast. The conspiracy episodes will unfortunately go on hold, and I will only be releasing Patreon content of deep dives, but not exclusive interviews. This will only be from June to the start of September. But for now, let's continue as normal and get into things. Here is this week's interview with fellow content creator Andy. Hi, Andy, and thank you so much for joining me today. I am really honoured to have you here on my show. As a fellow content creator, you have your very successful YouTube channel, Andy the Fellows, where you discuss skepticism, the New Age, spirituality, and a lot of stuff about cults. So I was very excited when I found out that you would be interested in coming to chat with me. I know that some of the stuff we're going to talk about today is going to be new territory for me, but I've watched enough of your content now to know that you are basically an expert and you're going to give me so much perspective on this subject. So would you like to introduce yourself to the listeners?
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. And that's a hell of an introduction. I'm going to have to try and live up to that now. But yeah, I mean, I'm making videos on cult skepticism and making sense of life after New Age spirituality as a former New Ager and member of an online sort of pseudo therapy cult. That's sort of how I describe it. But yeah, my interest really is making resources for people who are where I was, years back. People who are thinking about leaving a cult or leaving, sort of having just left a cult, trying to figure things out. And with all sort of with all this spiritual stuff in their head and looking to make sense of life, that's my focus really on the channel. But I try to do it with a bit of sense of humor as well. I think this stuff can get really, really heavy, so I try to keep it sort of light and sort of friendly,
Yeah, I think that definitely comes across as well. I found myself getting a lot of information from the videos, but in a way that didn't feel exhausting or heavy, like I'd need sort of a palate cleanser in between and need to go and watch like videos of kind of cats sitting in small boxes and things like that. It felt like, the content is perfectly done that way. So you mentioned becoming part of an online movement, which is what focuses on your personal experience with this type of sort of coercive control. Could you just tell us the name of the movement and a little bit about the practices and principles?
Yeah, so really, I suppose I should just make the distinction between New Age spirituality as a movement and Teal Swan as a leader within that. And then Teal Tribe or Tealers following Teal Swan. This was all stuff I was involved in. When I talk about the cult, I'm talking about Teal Tribe followers of Teal Swan, which I believe is a cult. And I'm always very clear about that, because I think something very important when we're talking about cults is that we encourage people to think, critically and make their mind up on things themselves when it's in this kind of an area where, this is an online cult, and it doesn't look like what you think of when you think of a cult. So I think it's important to encourage that. But as far as what it goes, it is all sort of centered around Teal Swan, who is a YouTube content creator, self-help revolutionary spiritual catalyst. So she's had all these sorts of titles over the years. She's got a new one every couple of years, but essentially what she's doing is she's giving people sort of spiritual teachings and psychological ideas, sort of psychological truths, if you like, with her sort of spin on them. And people like me find them on YouTube, and the way that they're done, I would say, creates a dependency on Teal. The way that
Mm-hmm.
these videos are made, the way that she positions these ideas, creates a bit of a dependency on Teal. So people continue to come back for more and more of what Teal's saying, Teal's
Mm-hmm.
ideas each week. She makes these videos every week, and then they become part of the community. And slowly but surely, over time, your personality begins to change. You become part of this sort of tribe, and all of the sort of things that you see in how people change with cults, they do happen here. But of course, because it's online, and this is one of the reasons that I'm really glad that we're talking about this now, is that often people don't consider online cults to be a possibility,
Mm-hmm.
because
Mm-hmm.
they do work differently, you know. But now with QAnon and things like that, we're starting to see how this can, these big movements like this, the way that this works is different though to an in-person cult. I hope I've got my point across there. Sort of went off in 100 different
Yeah.
directions, but
No. I think that
yeah.
that does give us a really great summary about sort of the figurehead at the top of this kind of pyramid, so to speak. What kind of content would I expect to find if I was to look up her content right now on YouTube? What sort of themes are explored in her content?
So right now, I think you would see, based on what I was seeing yesterday when I was having a bit of a look again, is that she seems to be pivoting now towards sort of bro sciencey. You know, you see a lot of this sort of alpha male kind of stuff where people are telling how the right man is, the right woman is, sort of pop psychology stuff. That was the video I saw yesterday. But she seems to be pivoting towards more psychology now. Whereas going back a few years, there was much more spiritual stuff in there. There was much more sort of talk about your soul being from a different planet and you incarnating on the earth to have this experience and that experience, and the law of attraction and stuff. So, and this is the thing I have to try and be clear about when I'm talking about Teal, is there's so much. You can talk for hours and hours and hours about this and never really scratch the surface. So it's hard to know where to start. But right now, she seems to be focusing a lot on psychology, and she tends to lace like spiritual ideas through that, universal truths through that. You know,
Right.
yeah.
And there was some controversy around her content a while back around the almost suicidal ideation that she was considered to be promoting on her channel. So some of the listeners may not know the name Teal Swan, but then may kind of recognize some of the things that she has been in the media for because of this controversy. So I didn't know if you could briefly just talk us through what happened there and why she was under such scrutiny.
Yeah. So Teal, I think it's important to say that Teal Swan is not a trained mental health professional or anything like this. And she's clear about that herself. She's not someone who's gone to university to study psychology or mental health. So when I'm saying, you know, before that she's sharing these sort of psychology things, she's not really educated on this in a sort of formal way. But what she does is she tends to offer advice from her point of view, which I would say is fairly limited, as someone who hasn't had much of a sort of training on this kind of stuff. You know, we can all have opinions, but when it gets into offering advice, I think that's when it gets iffy. And so some of her advice, at one point when she was speaking to people who were suicidal, she made a video at one point called "What to Do If You're Suicidal." I think that's more or less the title. And in that video, she was talking about, I believe it was in that video, there's a few videos she made on it, but when she's talking about suicide, she's saying suicide is like a reset button. And when so this is where it gets all very sort of mystical and stuff, but when you in your life are trying to use the law of attraction to manifest things in your life, but you don't get those things, they go into a vibrational escrow.
Right.
And then when you die and reincarnate, those things will be there for you in that new life, basically. So there's obviously a sort of similar theme there with like the Christian heaven kind of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
But that, I think, is what started making people more concerned that she might be sort of glorifying suicide, or romanticizing suicide, or encouraging people to kill themselves. And one of the things that she has said as well, I believe, is that you should commit to life, rather than sort of considering death and all this. Like, you either commit to life or commit to death, something along those lines, or something that she said. It's been a while since I heard her say that. But
Right. Yeah.
and I remember she was interviewed for the Gateway podcast that Jennings Brown did, and one of the points that he made in that was that often people don't, even people who are totally fine and sort of completely sort of mental health sort of balanced and everything, don't often feel 100% committed to life in all moments. So it's sort of almost a false dichotomy there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But so she's giving this kind of advice, and so the backlash that came around that time was really around that, and that being somewhat, I would say that that's somewhat of an irresponsible thing to be doing. And another thing she was also doing is encouraging people to visualize their deaths as well.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
think if I remember right. So what happened around that time is people started to Jennings Brown made this podcast, and then more recently there was a BBC piece that went out on a similar point around this idea. People started to sort of criticize that, and I did on my channel as well, was criticizing that. And I think what happened was, on Teal's side, the response was, oh, people are saying that Teal's encouraging people to kill themselves, and that's not what she's doing.
Mm-hmm.
Which, I wouldn't say that was what she was doing. I would say that what she's doing is perhaps unintentionally encouraging people to do things that may cause themselves,
Mm-hmm.
that may cause
Mm-hmm.
them to kill themselves, because I don't think she actually knows what she's doing. She's overconfident.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
Dunning-Kruger, right?
It's definitely a difficult one. In the BBC piece you mentioned, which is available on YouTube for anyone that might want to go and look it up. If you just type in Teal Swan BBC, I think the 10-minute clip will come straight up. I'll also post it in the show description. But there was a woman on that segment who spoke about her daughter taking her own life, and how the mother does directly blame Teal and her stance on suicide at that time, as a direct result of her daughter taking her own life, and watching these videos and being very invested in the things that Teal was saying on her channel. And I've spoken briefly about some of the work I used to do with children and young adults, but obviously when we work with children and vulnerable adults, if there's any inclination of self-harm or suicidal ideation, those things have to be taken extremely seriously. So we would always try to ascertain if the young person had, if they say they've thought about hurting themselves or taking their own life, you would ask them if they had thought about how they would do that. And if a young person said, no, it's just kind of something that's crossed my mind, you would put that on high alert, but not necessarily have that person under constant supervision at that time. But if they were to say to you sort of, well, I've been hiding, tablets under my mattress for the last month, you would take that information and kind of come to the conclusion that this person needs immediate help and constant supervision, and they really need to be seen by somebody that can help them professionally, and then you would push that up through the stages of safeguarding immediately. And I feel like when I heard about Teal Swan telling people to visualize their own death, it's almost giving them that tool of taking them to the next stage of maybe not just having the thought cross your mind, but really solidifying how you would do that, what methods you would use, and then taking the steps and measures to put those things in place, like things like tablets under the mattress, or however somebody might think about those things. So when I heard that, it was taking me back to kind of the work that I did with children, and how susceptible and vulnerable people are when they're in those frames of mind. And And that, yeah, it was hard to listen to, but you mentioned in some of your videos that you did with Telltale Atheist, who also has a lot of incredible content on cults um and in Teal Swan as well, actually, that there was some spirit science and shadow work that
Mm,
was used during your time around Teal Swan and her content.
mm, yeah.
So how would you describe spirit science and shadow work?
So spirit science is it's kind of a whole other thing. Spirit science is a project run by someone called Jordan Dutchnitz, I think is how it's pronounced, which is another YouTube channel, another project, which is sort of animated videos. But for me, that was what got me sort of exposed me to Teal,
Right.
because they did a video together at one point. And so spirit science really it's a whole other strange rabbit hole to go down, you know.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
um but shadow work, so the thing, and I like that you said during my time, because that's a really important point here, that often you see with people who are doing something similar to what Teal's doing, is that they will pivot over time. They will change their message over time. They will change their
Mm-hmm,
focus over
mm-hmm.
time. So like, when I was involved in it, it was a very different beast to what it is now. Of course, Teal is the same person, and she's showing a lot of the same behavior from what I'm seeing here now. But yeah, the focus was different. So during my time, shadow work was a big part of it. The law of attraction was a big part of it. For anyone who's not familiar with the law of attraction, it's the idea that your thoughts create your reality. You might have heard of it as The Secret, which sort
Mm-hmm.
of became much more popular, more recently. And the law of attraction really now has become sort of a more mainstream thing, as New Age spirituality has too. But so in my time following Teal, really the thing was that the law of attraction was one of these fundamental laws of the universe. So anything that you think, anything that you feel, affects your vibrational frequency, which then affects what you attract into your life, what you manifest into your life. So lots of people that are into the law of attraction try to use it to manifest houses and cars and perfect money. Basically, money is what they want it for a lot of
Mm-hmm.
times, or perfect relationships, things like that. And so this idea, and you might have heard Abraham Hicks talk about it in a very similar way to how Teal talks about it, because it does seem that Teal likes to get her ideas from other places and compile them and give them a little twist in her own sort of, with her own Tealisms, if you like. That's my take on that anyway. So the idea being that the law of attraction is what causes anything to happen in your life, right? And if bad things keep happening to you, or if you're not able to get what you want or live the life that you want, that's because of your shadow, because of your resistance to
Right.
what is happening or not happening, right? If you are, it's there's sort of this phrase you hear in New Age circles: "What you resist persists," which comes from Carl Jung, and Eckhart Tolle's got a version of it, and then Teal's sort of taken that as well. So it fits into this idea that if you're resisting something, then you are going to manifest what you're resisting into your life. So what you need to do is you need to release that resistance so that you can then manifest what you want.
Right.
So this is all kind of law of attraction 101 kind of stuff, I guess.
Right.
Um, so Teal's suggestion on how to release that resistance was a number of processes that she would come up with and sort of share. Again, reminder: this is not a mental health professional recommending tried and tested evidence-based psychology or therapy. This is someone who's coming up with stuff based on what she's read, I would imagine. The stories are that she spends a lot of time on the internet researching stuff, though she doesn't tend to credit her sources. But yeah, so what I would do when I was following her was a lot of shadow work to try to get to the sort of root belief, the core belief in my pain and so on and so forth, which again you can see a theme from in like CBT and in actual therapeutic sessions. This can be quite beneficial to sort of the downward arrow questioning to try and understand why you believe what you believe, which is effectively how shadow work works. But then you're not doing that with a therapist. You're doing this on your own, or you're doing this with other followers of Teal. So you're sort of therapizing each other in private messaging or whatever. So that's kind of how that fits together, though. So to attract what you want, you need to release resistance to what you don't want, and then you'll be able to have what you want. It's sort of very convoluted, and shadow work was a big part of that. And now that's sort of shifted on. She doesn't talk as much about the law of attraction now, and shadow work has kind of been supplanted by the completion process, which is her new flagship from what I've seen. And there's a whole controversy over whether that's original to her or not. I mean, I try not to sound like I'm sort of going at her, because I don't want to. I think that there's enough to talk about here without talking about her personally, but it's important to consider the way that she seems to behave and a lot of stuff to give context to what we're talking about. But there's a lot of controversy around the originality of her ideas, the originality of her content. I reckon she back when I was all spiritual and stuff, I came up with some like a quote that I put on my Instagram, which then apparently she seems to have nicked and put on her her Instagram later. So there's a lot of this kind of potential plagiarism from alleged plagiarism, I should say, with this kind of stuff as well. I mean, it gets in some, I would say, can go in some really trashy directions at times, unfortunately. But I try to stay away from that side of things when I'm talking about this on the channel, because yeah.
Well, one of the red flags in everything you've just said there, just to pick one out of the many things that we could discuss from everything that you've just said, is almost it sounds almost like you're being encouraged to relinquish control, and that is so dangerous when it comes to thought reform and indoctrination, because if you're practicing how to relinquish control, where does that stop? We could do it on a basic level for health and well-being, negative thoughts and feelings, but where does that stop if you're kind of in this closed circuit community, like you've just explained, sort of messaging each other constantly on the internet, watching Teal's videos, becoming further and further involved in this closed circuit where you're all therapizing each other. Where does that relinquishing of control end, and where do you retain your seeds of doubt and things like that? So that's what I'd be really worried that if I was to practice something along similar lines, I would end up eventually not questioning things that I should question, and just going along with ideas and ideologies that somebody else is telling me is that's what's right, and not questioning it. So that's a bit worrying. But you mentioned briefly as well. Sorry, you go.
I just want to add to something you were saying there. I think something that also just sort of emphasizes what you were saying there really is, in this group as well, you're kind of the way that this shadow working thing works is that any resistance you do have to something, any problem you have with something, tends to be the cause for that tends to be found within the individual who's having that problem. It's so if someone or something is happening that is hurting someone, or is it's damaging someone in some way, then through the process of shadow work and through this sort of ideology that does tend to be held by the people in this group, it's sort of like a victim blaming thing, if you like. It's like, if you've got a problem with that, that's because you have resistance to it. Very little, very rarely is it the case that it's said that, oh, maybe there's actually something wrong with that. Maybe actually there's something that all humans would have a problem with there. You know, it's very much driving into the individual's
Hmm.
personal issue and the insistence that it must be something in your shadow personally, not something that actually you have a problem with for positive reasons or for
Yeah,
the reasons of boundaries, for example. You know, and of
yeah,
course,
yeah.
yeah, of course, Teal is likely to contradict herself in talking about boundaries there and saying about how you should set boundaries. But she also talks about how skepticism is the belief that the positive belief that something is wrong or something like that. And you can see that in a video on skepticism, the belief that they know what is wrong or something along those ideas. So she sort of belittles skepticism as well. A lot of this is sort of
Hmm.
going back in my memory now, so I'm trying to like pull this stuff out. Sorry, but
No, it's fine. It's
yeah.
fine. And something I found really interesting that you mentioned previously was two things kind of stitching together. Is that you mentioned that some of the content that Teal is releasing seems to be going down sort of almost the alpha male route of ideas, and
Mm,
I wonder, and especially with the kind of almost kind of encroaching on plagiarism. There's the Canadian clinical psychologist and professor of psychology, Jordan Peterson, whose videos have
mm,
suddenly become extremely popular around all of those similar themes.
mm,
And a lot, I know a lot of his stuff is based on Carl Jung and Jungian psychology that you mentioned also before, that some of the shadow work is kind of
mm.
based on some of that psychology. So I
Yeah,
wonder if it's almost like following the trends in terms of which content to be releasing, which topics to broach, and which things to advocate for in terms of what's really popular. Because
yeah,
Jordan Peterson's been creating content for years, but all of a sudden, for some reason, even though his controversial video came out a few years ago, all of a sudden now it's like he is just everywhere, and everybody's watching his stuff on how, how to be an alpha male and how to be the correct type of man. And
yeah.
so I just wonder if there's a link there.
I think absolutely. I think this is something that I've mentioned on the channel a few times, but I haven't really found the place to go into this in depth. I don't think so. Maybe this is the place, in talking about this. I think that whenever you look at New Age spirituality, it is a stone's throw away from alternative medicine and alternative health and stuff
Mm-hmm.
like that. It's a stone's throw away thereafter from anti-vax sentiment, but
Right.
it's also a stone's throw away from this kind of men go in their own way thing as well at the moment, which is odd to me, but it is happening. And I think that when you look at a lot of the ideas in New Age thought, they do predispose themselves towards conspiratorial thinking, towards this sort of dichotomous male female energies, which you see a lot, which came from Gerald Gardner, I think, the founder of Wicca, talking about male and female, masculine, feminine
Mm-hmm.
energies and that kind of stuff, and that's become a mainstay in. Or at least he had an emphasis on it. Perhaps he didn't come up with that one, but there was an emphasis on that, which popularized that in those circles, and so that has kind of carried through into New Age now. So you can see how if there's a focus on a person's masculine energy and a person's feminine energy, and how this person has more masculine energy, this person has less masculine energy, and so on and so
Mm-hmm.
forth,
Mm-hmm.
that is sort of like fertile ground for a conversation about what is more masculine, what is more feminine, and then that
Absolutely.
can
Yeah.
set you up for these kinds of conversations. So I think in a similar way that, for example, within New Age thought, there is very much the idea of Illuminati back when that was the main conspiracy theory, right? The 9/11 truth times, right?
Mm-hmm.
When in those times there was this sort of covert anti-Semitic conspiracy theory thing prevalent within New Age circles. You see in like Thrive documentary, for example, that's kind of touched on a little bit there, and then you see it in Zeitgeist as well, touched on a little bit
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
there. These are all sort of adjacent to these sorts of New Age ideas, and So nowadays, when you look at the new age, you also have to look at conspiracy theories. You also have to look at anti-vaxxers and natural health and alternative health and try to figure out whether any of that, there's any grains of truth in any of that. And of course, now we're also seeing that shift over into the sort of the incel and the men go in their own way territory, especially as now on the internet with QAnon being the sort of mystical wing of MAGA, and the conspiracy theories in there being sort of like a grand unified conspiracy theory that ties in a lot of the stuff that New Age is sort of at times believed anyway. It's all linked. It's one conversation. It is one thing to really be looking at. It's just facets of a larger picture here, I think. So yeah, definitely a connection.
I think it's something that people I speak to on this show all the time, something all of them have said about, advice on what to do when leaving, your own movement or sect or cult or whichever label you would put on that particular group that you're a part of, is to do research. And I think that applies here in terms of, if somebody says to you, something that sounds really interesting around something like the law of attraction, it's okay to go off and do your own research about that subject before becoming fully committed to including that into your lifestyle. Even if it's just, practicing a mantra in the morning. If you're not sure about the effects that could have on you as a person, or how susceptible that might make you to somebody else's ideas and thoughts, just go and read all the time. Go and research and if you are, interested in New Age things and spirituality and all that stuff, I think it's still okay to go off and research and be a bit skeptical without losing any of that authenticity that you may feel towards spiritualism and things like that, which
absolutely
I think is always difficult, especially when it comes to things like the internet, because everybody's so judgmental in what's right and what's wrong and things like that. But I wanted to ask quickly, and then I think there's only 2 or 3 questions left about Teal, and we can move on from her specifically. But there's supposedly some special qualities about Teal Swan that separates her from the rest of humanity, and I wondered if you could just explain those qualities to the listeners and give them an idea of what they include.
Yeah, I mean, what isn't special about Teal? Let's be honest. I mean, just going back to some of the claims she's made from memory, that she is like a soul fork, an Arcturian soul fork, which means that she is an Arcturian alien, which is projected forth into a 12th dimensional body or something, which is then projected forth into a human body. If you can make sense of any of that, it's all very sort of lingo heavy, but the idea is that she's an alien who's incarnated as a human, and part of that is that she's again, her words, according to her, I say her words, I'm paraphrasing, but according to her, she's been made beautiful so that people will listen to her. And she's been made to be beautiful so that lots of people will find her, lots of people will listen to her. She's a special kind of attractive that everybody will find her attractive on any continent, she said. And she sort of, in that part of the interview that she said that in, she slid into just a moment talking about how if an African woman were doing what she was doing, then less people would find that attractive because of the kinds of traits that she has. She's more attractive to other people, which I mean that's a whole other thing, but yeah, not great. And so she's she comes out with some real stuff. She also says that she has extrasensory abilities. So I remember her saying at one point she didn't see negative space. She only saw energy, like she didn't see the space between things. She saw energy. She at one point claimed to be a medical medium, which basically means she can see energy inside a person's body and diagnose sickness just by looking at them, which again, wow. Um, the list goes on. I mean, there's other stuff she's come out with as well. One thing that stands out to me, going back to the suicide issue as well, is that in a video where she talked about her stance on suicide after she was criticized for it. And I think this was after I started talking about it on the channel as well. So she, in that video, said that she personal experience with suicidal ideation, and also she has extrasensory abilities, which makes her uniquely qualified to talk about suicide, apparently. So yeah, she's the
very,
exception to the
very
rule in that case,
strange.
I guess. Yeah. So yeah, if maybe we should have started on that these like bizarre claims, because that's Teal. That is the person we're talking about here.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Well, when you watch some of her content, she's clearly charismatic in the way that she talks and the way that she comes across. And but when you get into the alien side of things, she sounds almost like I don't know if you've heard of Love Has Won and the
I have heard of that.
Yeah, because I'm getting Amy vibes. Well, not when I watch Teal's content, but I don't think it's as open book as Love Has Won in terms of their ideologies and beliefs and practices. But when you say it like the way that we've just explored it, that gives me Amy vibes. And Amy is the leader of Love Has Won, and believes that she is going to transport all of her devout followers to a higher plane somewhere off this planet.
Brilliant.
So those themes are similar. They almost could be the same person. Yeah.
But I think what's interesting with Teal, though, from what you said there about sort of the ascension to the higher dimension and all that stuff, first of all, that rings a few cognitive dissonance bells, in the sense that the original studies on cognitive dissonance were studying a group very similar to that. But I think also something that's worth mentioning with Teal is that Teal seems to have, and I again speak from my personal experience here, she seems to be able to desensitize people to the difficulties of doing the kind of work that she's suggesting people do. And she sort of tells people that, in a way, that the sort of message comes across that that if it's hard, if it's difficult, if it's painful, well, that's what healing's like, and that is to some extent true. Healing's not always, rainbows and butterflies, but she seems to emphasize that this doesn't end. There is no end to this sort of integration of your shadow and healing process. So in an interesting way, she's not promising some utopian high dimensional existence after this, although she does have a thing with sort of mental health, the mental health field being improved, and humanity waking up and becoming more conscious, and this kind of a thing, which is again a new age theme. But I think it's interesting that when I was involved in this, and I've seen this from other people who have also left, mental health diminishes significantly. Like the quality of your mental health, the stability of your mental health diminishes significantly while you're following what she's doing. I speak from my experience there and from what I've seen from other people who've left. And then when you leave and you stop doing the processes and you stop believing a lot of what she's saying, somehow depression is easier to handle if you had it before, or it's actually not there anymore because you didn't have it before, and this has perhaps caused it. In my experience, that really set off a lot of my mental health issues, which were to some extent present anyway, but not really something I was struggling with. It sort of exacerbated things for me. And then when I left, I felt a lot better. It was like a weight had been lifted, but I was now dealing with extra stuff that I hadn't necessarily had to deal with before, in anxiety and depression. Obviously it affected my relationships with my family. I didn't talk to my dad for like a year because I came to believe that he was a very, very bad person, because a lot of Teal's processes that I was doing at the time led me to believe that in a sense he was to blame for the problems I was having and the difficulties I was having. So I began to see him as bad, and that wasn't the only influence. As to that, I was going through a lot at the time, but it certainly set up the possibility for me to withdraw from him a little bit. We're much closer now, and I see the truth of who he is now a little bit more. You know?
Yeah. I made a note there to go back to that and ask about how things have changed since, if that wasn't something that you mentioned. So
a lot better now.
How did you find yourself within the ranks of Teal Swan? What was your journey like leading up to finding her videos and becoming sort of involved in her work?
Well, I started to get interested in spirituality when I was studying music at college, and I was reading about Buddhism and Taoism. I was open to these kinds of ideas and exploring them a little bit. And then in 2012, I moved out of home from my mum's to a flat with my girlfriend at the time, which I wasn't really ready for. And when we talk about cults, we talk about a change in your life being a part of what may make someone susceptible to this. So that was part of a change in my life. I left home, moved out. I wasn't really ready for that, but my girlfriend at the time wanted to do it. So I was like, well, let's do it together. We always talked about doing it together. So let's do it together, So I did that. And then later that year, a close friend of mine died. And that kind of threw me. I'd never lost anybody before. I didn't really know what to do with the grief. So I sort of turned, I sort of closed myself off a little bit from life a bit at that point, and started to watch just documentaries on YouTube as sort of escapism, and I was watching all these ancient aliens things. I think I was a 9/11 truther before that, but I started to watch more conspiracy theory stuff and ancient alien stuff on YouTube, and sort of exhausted that when YouTube's algorithm was a bit more of a baby. At that time it wasn't quite what it is now. It's always got something for you now, hasn't it? Ancient aliens. Have you considered white supremacy? But yeah, so I was kind of watching all that stuff, and I exhausted that. And then I went onto my Facebook and I said, has anybody got anything like this, sort of alternative history, if you like, stuff? And someone who I'd known from college recommended Spirit Science to me. And so I watched, I think, everything on the main Spirit Science channel within about a week or so, which I think was only sort of 22 episodes, maybe 11 episodes. I can't really remember the exact number, but I watched them quite quickly. And these are videos. There was a human history movie which talks about Atlantis and Lemuria and all of that kind of stuff, which was like an hour and a half long, something like that. And then there was all these shorter episodes. I watched all of that, and then I found, I think on that channel, the Spirit Science Teal Swan collaboration video, which I sort of mentioned earlier when we were starting to talk about this. That was where I found Teal. And so then I started to watch her videos. And the thing is with Teal, this is when you watch a Teal video, if you do, and I don't recommend it, but if you do and you're interested in looking into this, what you'll see, I think, is that, as you mentioned earlier, Casey, that this is somebody who is very confident, very charismatic. She comes across like she knows what she's talking about, This is someone who seems to have everything figured out on face value. She makes sense of more stuff than many other people that you talk to or watch on the internet, and she seems to talk about how everything sort of connects in sort of a big picture, the vibration of this and that, and any sort of a topic Teal could probably go off on and give you a bit of a speech on. So I sort of found in that certainty that I was looking for. And I think that this is true of a lot of people who are going through a change in their lives, who find a cult, is that it's like a relief in a way. It's certainty, it's security, it's doing something for them. And I think this is something that when we talk about cults, we don't talk about as much. We talk about how the leader's bad and how the group's bad and stuff. And yeah, but we also, I think, can consider what makes one person more susceptible than somebody else. And I know in my case, while I may have been susceptible anyway, just because of the kind of person I was at that time, this made me more vulnerable to it. I was struggling with grief, I was struggling with my mental health, and I was going through that change in my life where moving home and starting to be more self-sufficient in the world. And there's a phrase Eric Hoffer uses in his book, The True Believer, the burden of liberty, which I think is exactly how I was feeling there. It was the burden of liberty. What do I do? How do I deal with this? And Teal came and was like, here's an answer. And that was sort of how I found myself there. And it kind of went on from there.
I guess it's kind of like that, whoever gets their foot in the door first when you're in sort of such a transitional period as you were, you know, not only were you moving out and having that big upheaval in your life, but you're obviously experiencing this grief, which I'm really sorry about. It's so hard to go through anything like that at any age. When you lose any person that's, you know, close to you in that way, it's difficult. But with all the other things involved at that time as well, it's kind of almost like maybe you would have found Amy from Love Has Won first, and that could have been the thing that spoke to you at that time.
Exactly. Could have been anything, couldn't it?
Yeah, and it's hard to know exactly what those things will be, but I was just talking about this in another episode just yesterday. It doesn't matter if a person has a low IQ or high IQ or a strong will or a weak will, or however you want to sum up that person, whatever boxes you want to put that person in. Any person on the planet can be brought into these types of high controlling groups. When somebody says who can be indoctrinated, the answer is anybody. And it just takes, you know, 2 or 3 different things coming together, like what you were experiencing, for that to be the case. So you find Teal's videos, and how does your involvement or commitment grow in terms of you know, watching a few videos and then becoming sort of completely consumed by Teal Swan and her followers?
Yeah, well, I started watching her videos all the time, really. It was started off with 1 or 2 videos, and then it was all the videos I could find, all the content I could consume, interviews, videos on her channel, videos on other channels, you know, everything that I could find. I was just sort of you know, consuming all of that, eating all of that up. And then I realized at that point I started to parrot a lot of it back, because, you know, whenever you read something or you watch something, you start to integrate that into your way of thinking, into your way of sort of approaching things. And usually that can be harmless. That just makes you a bit more of an interesting person to have a conversation with, right? But other times, when the content or the information that you're taking on is predisposed towards certain perhaps more destructive things, then that can affect you in other ways. It can cause different things to happen. So I think what was going on for me at that time was that I became somewhat intolerable for people that weren't also interested in this stuff. And I started to say all these things, and people didn't really know what I was talking about, I think, because I was talking about the law of attraction and energy and vibration and star seed and, you know, indigo, this and that and all the rest of it. And so I think, and I did a video about this on my channel where I use screenshots and stuff from Facebook posts at the time, and you can see how the more I start talking about this kind of stuff, and about how you know, in 2012 there was going to be you know, an awakening moment or an ascension moment or this and that, which I don't think was a Teal specific thing. I think that was sort of a larger New Age thing.
Right, yeah.
I started to I started to alienate people. You can see in the responses to those Facebook posts, less and less people from my old life, from my life before Teal, that were sort of involving themselves in my day to day. And
Yeah.
so then I started to throw in, I think at that point, as I was realizing there were less people around, less people to sort of be in touch with, that was when I think I found Teal Tribe. And I'm not sure exactly on all the dates there, but that was a Facebook group. It's no longer there in the exact form that it was during the BBC investigation. It was taken down by Facebook.
Right.
But in the form that it was there, it was quite large and growing even until Facebook took it down. But this was, back in 2012. I think 2012 was I think it was then. Again, all my dates are like there, but I think it was the end of 2012 that I was involved in this, and I found this group anyway. And I suddenly now I'm around all these other people who are watching Teal's content, who are approaching things in the same way as I am now, because I've taken on all this stuff, which is again predisposed towards developing a dependency on Teal and seeing things in a very totalistic way. It's very all-consuming, this kind of an ideology, because if you can pull out the carpet from underneath someone, if you tell them that everything in life is down to your vibrational frequency, your thoughts and your feelings, and if you can
Right.
convince them of that, and then you can convince them that you're the one that knows how that works, then that permeates everything in your life. So
Absolutely. Yeah. And then
yeah.
you've got unlimited like followers at that point, where who isn't looking for those answers, and who doesn't want those things, and that's
Exactly.
where the charismatic leader comes in, and that's where it's problematic in terms of like anybody who's seeking for anything, whether it's wealth or perfect relationships like you mentioned before, or how to deal with grief, bereavement, transitional periods. If somebody says, well, I have the answer to all of those things, like where does that stop in terms of how many people will begin to follow that person?
Yeah, exactly. And that was kind of how it felt in the group as well. It was like we've all got the answer to this, and of course that's true of any group like this, isn't it? We've got the answer. Everyone
Yeah.
else is unconscious or a hater or whatever.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of how that sort of became in the group there as well. We were sort of all sharing these ideas, all sort of adding to each other's beliefs in this, sort of cobbling together a shared map of reality based on Teal's teachings. And she would be there. She was present in the group. I think the way that things went with the group, she seems to have positioned it more as a fan group now, as a Teal's fan group. Whereas, way back when she was an admin of the Facebook group, she was present there. Her and her closest, sort of her inner circle, if you like, were present there,
Right.
and would occasionally come along and stir things up a little bit, saying the odd thing here and there. I say that makes it sound like she was causing trouble. I don't think she was really. Um, but yeah. That's I say causing trouble. I would say she probably is causing trouble, but conflict within a group she wasn't causing.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, just to clarify that point. But yeah, I don't want to go off on a tangent, so I'll just let you.
No, and there was one point where you mentioned that some of the inner circle members had paid for you to attend a workshop.
Yeah, well, it wasn't her inner circle members that paid for that. It was other Tealers, other
Right.
sort
Okay.
of
Okay.
rank and file, if you like, that had paid for that. So and still to this day, I think that's quite a beautiful gesture.
Yeah.
Um,
Absolutely. Yeah.
but that was in 2014. So I got involved in 2012. My whole life was sort of turned upside down again in 2013 and 2014. And in April 2014, I went to a workshop in London that she was hosting. And before that, I'd sort of been couch surfing across the UK, because I'd given up the flat that I was living in with my girlfriend at the time. We'd broken up. Teal's advice was what sort of encouraged me to break up with her, or to start that process. To be fair, it was probably a good thing we broke up. But even so, Teal's teachings did have a hand in that.
Right.
And then I ended up, after that sort of couch surfing and staying with other people I'd met through Teal Tribe. I then was in London going to this workshop, and I'd run out of money because I'd spent it all traveling around. And I was just at that point say, well, I'm here in London, I'll see all of you and I won't go to the workshop, And then a few people said, well, I'll have a whip round and we'll get the ticket money for you, which, lovely of them to do that. And so I got into the workshop, and that was an interesting day, to say the least. I think if anyone's seen the Oh No, Ross and Carrie episodes where they went to a Teal workshop and they really break it down, that will give you some idea of like the atmosphere, the vibe and stuff. But it is interesting. It is it's a vibe, but it's not anything out of the ordinary or particularly like dancing around and singing songs or anything. It's very much like Teal's on stage, all eyes on Teal. Let's all just watch Teal do. It's just therapy with people in the audience publicly, pretty much, which, as you can imagine, is quite an experience. And I think it fits into the confessional mode, really, of how cults work. The idea of someone coming up and spilling their heart, pouring their heart out in front of a whole audience, and then Teal telling them what to do and how to fix it, and making all sorts of assertions about what's really going on for them that they don't really realize. In a sort of, it's very, it feels sort of like a one of these TV sort of things, like Jerry Springer's almost.
Yeah, I am getting televangelist vibes. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
It's as well as what you just said there about the confessional side of things. Once you offer that information up to somebody, if it's something that is what you believe at that time to be the root cause of your depression or anxiety or difficulties in everyday life, as soon as you offer that information up to somebody, it's almost like it belongs to them now, and they have that power over you because you've given them that vulnerable piece of you and you've asked them what you're supposed to do with it. So once that person has that information, it's like you're one step closer to being fully committed to that person and their ideas, because I think it's natural for humans to. It's like when you get into a new relationship with somebody and you're like, I really like this person, but I'm not sure if they like me as much as I like them. All those juvenile thoughts and feelings that come with new relationships. And when it comes to actually kind of bearing your soul and saying, like I would like to this to work out and us to stay together and become serious and take the next steps, whatever they may be. You're kind of at your most vulnerable because you don't want to be rejected. And I feel like it's similar in these situations where even if it's in a room full of people where you offer up that information to somebody, you've bared your soul and given them that vulnerability, and you don't want to be rejected. And sometimes in relationships, even if they don't work, people will stay in those environments because they don't want to admit that they've trusted the wrong person, that they've given that vulnerability to the wrong person or the wrong partner. And maybe they should have held back before offering all of those parts to that person. But at the same time, sometimes you need to do that to find out that person isn't the right person for you in terms of a romantic relationship or a friendship. Or somebody who you're going to put in charge of your life and tell them, ask them how to make it all better and to make, all the pain go away and all the difficulty to go away. So it's hard because that's almost what therapy is. You go to your therapist and you bear everything to them, but then obviously they're professionally equipped to give you the tools that you need to mend the things that are difficult and the things that hurt, which Teal doesn't have in a professional capacity.
Of course. Yeah, and
So
she'll say stuff like, "I think you're passively suicidal" or something like that. It's like if someone's saying something. I believe I heard her say that once. It's like,
that's so
so you're
bad,
just.
isn't it? Oh.
I know, I know. Where to start with that? It's
But I always say on this show, you know, what I've said a number of times, I don't want to sit here and armchair diagnose, because I'm not a professional and I don't have the qualifications or capacity to be able to say, well, he sounds
of
like
course,
he
yeah.
had bipolar,
Hmm.
because that's not fair to say those things. And if that person, even if the person, maybe if they weren't, and so if somebody came up to me and said, you've got the traits of somebody with paranoid schizophrenia, I'd start thinking, oh really, well maybe I do, maybe I need to go
Hmm.
and see somebody or speak to somebody. If somebody as sure of themselves and as confident, as charismatic as Teal Swan is,
Absolutely.
comes up to you and says to you, I recognize these traits of this mental illness in you here right now, or you know, these negative thoughts or feelings or depression or anxiety, or whatever label she wants to kind of put in your direction, and
Hmm.
you've paid to be there. It's almost
Hmm.
like you're paying for that person's professional opinion, and she's telling you that you know, you have the potential to be suicidal, and then you're like, well, oh actually, well maybe I am.
And you know what makes that worse? She says passively, which is like, I know your mind better than you do.
And then you go back to the things that she said before about being, you need to be committive in this life, you need to make commitments,
Hmm.
and you're either committing to life or committing to death. So if you're passively suicidal, you're basically sitting on the fence, which is everything that she is
Hmm.
against, because she's saying you should
Hmm.
be one thing or the other. So yeah, I mean, to pick apart statements like that, we could just sit here all day. I just
Yeah,
I don't know, that's very, I feel like that's a very dangerous thing to be saying to somebody. And
absolutely.
then you
Absolutely.
mentioned that you would start parroting some of the phrases and videos and ideas that you know, once you'd gone. I've drawn a little diagram here which I which I can't show you because my camera, but it says rabbit hole at the top, and then
Yeah.
there's loads of arrows just going down the page, and at the bottom it says QAnon. And I think what I was thinking about that is each arrow is kind of one step further
Mm.
into you finding Teal. So you started with things like, you know, Buddhism and Taoism, and then there's the ancient
Mm.
aliens, and then it's like one step further, one step further. Once I
Hmm.
finish
Hmm.
one thing, what's the next thing for me to jump into? And it's kind of going deeper and deeper and deeper into this rabbit hole until you find yourself like in the fold of Teal Swan. And I
Yeah.
feel like that is so similar to what has happened with the online phenomenon, which is QAnon. And the only reason, you know, I always go back to this is because it is the perfect example of an online
Hmm.
cult that has torn families apart and caused so much damage, and has the potential, which we've seen in the rallies and stuff leading up to the inauguration, is the potential for offline harm.
Hmm.
So any of these movements that share these qualities and similarities and characteristics, I think should be compared to one another. And you mentioned in one of your videos that your social media posts began to sound like cue drops because there was a load of rambling with provocative leading questions at the end. Um,
Mm.
so do you think that Teal Swan and the work that she does has similar patterns or characteristics to QAnon, with sort of the online hive mind aspect of things?
I think so. I think that what we're looking at here is a modern version of the classic cult. I think that this is fundamentally very, very similar to how, traditional cults, when you think of cults like, Rajneeshpuram or the People's Temple or any of these kinds of things, you see sort of the stereotypical idea of a cult: people in certain clothes, acting a certain way, speaking a certain way. But now in our modern time, we've got the internet, and so many people spend so much more time on the internet. The level of disillusionment with society, the frustration with society, is increasing more and more and more. and ever more so with the pandemic and everything that's been happening recently. And then you add to that people having more time on their hands, with something like QAnon. Of course people are going to get red pill, and I think that when you look at Teal's thing, it is very similar. That and I think you highlight a really good point there, is it is a very similar process that you find. You go onto the internet with a question and an incomplete skepticism. And I say incomplete because it's one thing to go, I wonder what this means. I'm going to double check. I'm going to fact check this and that. But if that doesn't also include a consideration of the motivations of the individual that's written the thing, then you can start to you can start to go a bit wrong, if you like, with what you're taking as fact. It starts with a question, for example, what to do when you're suicidal, or how does the law of attraction really work, or something like that, right? And then you find a Teal Swan video, and then because Teal knows what she's doing with YouTube, and this is just good YouTubing, her videos link to other videos. Now I have to say, I've never seen anybody link to quite as many videos in one single video as Teal. I've seen her do 3-4 links in one video before. And what she'll do is she'll start to explain a concept, and then she'll say, to understand more about this, watch my video on X. And then in that video, she'll start to explain a concept, and she'll say, to understand more about this, watch video Y. And it will go on and on. So you never fully, and this is something with ethereal ideas as well, is that in order for them to be appealing to an extent, you have to not be able to quite grasp them,
Yep, your glass is never full. You always feel like you're kind of, or you're trying to get it to the top, but it never quite gets there. You never get that full level of fulfillment.
And I think that plays in really nicely. I say nicely in terms of admiring this as a terrible, terrible thing to do to a human brain. I think it fits in quite well with the, Teal being an authority. Well, she seems to understand this, but I don't. So I need to go to her to get the answers on this, And of course, the fact that it's most of it, especially when you're talking about the law of attraction, is unverifiable as well, which makes it even more ethereal, even more appealing to people who are grappling for some sort of something ineffable, something that can make their life have a bit more meaning or make a bit more sense.
Yeah. And also very similar to QAnon in the sense that those things are unverifiable. And then you say to somebody, well, this has been fact checked on the news, and then, well, you are the news, and it's like every piece of information or fact to dispute what somebody is saying around anything to do with QAnon, then just comes back with, well, you are the news. So then how is there ever that rationality or where is that base for conversation? If the answer is always, well, they don't want you to see the truth. And the only reason I went back to QAnon there specifically is because when I go onto the QAnon casualties subreddit and read, some of the stories about people who have lost touch with parents or children or grandparents or aunties or uncles because of their affiliation with QAnon and their kind of disillusioned ideas, they start off doing things like watching documentaries about ancient aliens, or reading things about the Clintons, and then kind of finding one article that leads them to another article that leads them to another. And before you know it, this person has spent hours and hours and hours on the internet going down a similar process to the one that you've described, that you went through, until they find themselves at the peak of almost being at the peak of saying, well, the Clintons do this, they murdered babies and drink their blood and eat their flesh. And Trump's going to do this, and he's going to save the world, and he could never do anything wrong in my eyes. And Pizzagate and Wayfair and all of these things then all start coming in. So then it goes from kind of maybe believing in ancient aliens or maybe believing in the lost city of Atlantis to all of a sudden being consumed by all of these conspiracy theories that you then believe to be completely true. And with Trump as the sort of godhead figurehead of the entire movement. So I feel like maybe With Teal Swan, it's on a smaller scale, but the characteristics of the process on how people arrive at her content seems to be quite similar. And for her most devout followers, it almost sounds like the same rhetoric from a Trump supporter to a Teal Swan Tealite, or however you described them earlier.
Tealer.
Tealer.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's worrying, because where does the restriction come from if you're in bed unsupervised as an adult, which I saw a meme earlier actually that I was telling my partner about, that made me laugh, because it said, I don't understand adulthood. All of a sudden, you're just constantly unsupervised. How is that allowed? And I was like, that's so true. So where, if you don't put, I don't know, restrictions on screen time or something like that to stop yourself from going down these rabbit holes, where does it end? Where does it stop? And it's always really difficult to read the stories on the QAnon casualties subreddit, but the stories are so important because they just highlight the fact that the person that this poster has decided to cut off contact with, or is really struggling to communicate with, started off having sort of a little bit of skepticism, and then is described as jumping off the deep end all of a sudden because of the access to this type of hive mind QAnon Q drops. And it really and before as well, something that I was going to mention, it was really it's really interesting that you said Rajneeshpuram, because I watched Wild Wild Country the other day, and I think I decided that Sheila's the charismatic leader in that entire thing. I think she to me stands out as the person that was running the show. And when she was approached and asked if she had instructed one of her followers to inject Osho's doctor with something that would kill him, she just laughed and said, haha, is that what you people think? When we'd just seen somebody testify saying, I stabbed the doctor with the needle under Sheila's instructions. And then I watched Teal being interviewed by somebody, and they said, you're being accused of glorifying suicide. And she laughed in exactly the same way that Sheila did. It was almost a snore. And then she said, is that really what people think? And I thought to myself in that exact moment, that's the same type of gaslighting that Sheila used when she was asked up front if she had instructed somebody to commit murder on her behalf. So when Teal laughed like that and kind of blew it off, to me that sent red flags in terms of not taking responsibility for what you think you probably have done, which is to glorify suicide in one way or another. But what happened at what happened at the peak of your involvement to make you kind of take a step back and say, hang on a minute, something is not right here? How does it go from sort of the workshop up until the moment you decide to leave?
Well, I left the workshop and went back to my mum's house because I had nowhere else to go. So I went and slept on her sofa for a bit, and I slowly started to see my ideas, my beliefs, sort of, I guess, clash with reality and like what was expected of me for my family and stuff. Because I had this idea, law of attraction and that I shouldn't do anything I don't want to do if it's not of like doesn't make me feel good, then I'm not in a high vibration, so I need to not do that, whereas obviously now I realize if you don't like something, it doesn't mean you should like not do it, obviously, like just get on.
Yeah
But at the time it was sort of playing into a lot of that kind of stuff, and I noticed my mental health was starting to deteriorate relatively quickly. I actually, there was the Teal Tribe dating group. So a big part of this was actually meeting the person who's now my wife. We met through the
Oh,
group.
awesome.
Yeah, we met through Teal Tribe Dating on Facebook, and put our profiles in there, and started talking. And so I was into it more than her, I would say. Uh,
Right.
Although we've realised since that it's definitely affected us both in ways we hadn't realised. And with stuff like this, you're always going, "Oh shit, that's a Teal thing, isn't it?" Like
Mm-hmm,
that's
mm-hmm.
like I didn't realise it was still there. This stuff's still on some sort of little nooks and crannies of the way you approach things, you know. But yeah, so she wasn't as into it as I was, and that meant that she was sort of a bit more inquisitive, a little bit sort of questioning things a little bit more, and not seeing Tia as some just incredible sort of enlightened person, you know. And again, I suppose I should clarify there. Teal doesn't even really refer to herself as enlightened. She's created this image of like the leading learner kind of a thing.
Mm-hmm,
So you know,
mm-hmm.
she's like, I have problems, I have struggles too, and so on. But the way that it's done is, I would say, sort of, you know, not.
Yeah, yeah, that was
Yeah.
something I was going to ask before, actually, when you said that when Teal would say to people that you can never fully become healed or never fully kind of stop working with your shadow to get rid of everything negative. So I was going to ask if she feels like she's reached a level of enlightenment, because it sounds as
Mm.
though she's telling everybody else that that's impossible. So that was something I was going to
Yeah.
mention,
And
but
that's because she's uniquely qualified to talk about this stuff.
yeah, of course, yeah, that's something that
No,
I
but she,
had forgotten about.
yeah, yeah, it would be a bit of a obvious contradiction, wouldn't it, if she was like,
Hmm,
"I'm
hmm.
enlightened, but you will need to never ever stop working." But she also, you know, there was an interview with an ex husband of hers where she was talking about how she's a self improvement addict, and if anyone wants to be around them, then they need to be as hooked on personal development as she is, you know. And yet I believe in the same interview it was also said that no one alerts Teal to her shadows. She does that herself. You know, you don't get involved in Teal's
Right.
process,
Okay. Okay.
which sets quite the scene, doesn't it?
Hmm.
um but anyway, yeah, so going back to what I was saying about what happened for me there. I met my partner through Teal Tribe Dating, and we started to talk more and more. The reason I'm living in Mexico is because this is where she's from. So we started talking over Skype and stuff a lot.
Hmm.
And yeah, we would talk about different Teal things here and there. And as I wanted to be here with her more and more, and found that my life wasn't reflecting the kind of a life that I was expecting it might if I was to follow Teal's instructions, that started to that sort of clash of reality and this map of reality became more and more obvious. And as I was talking to Astrid, my wife, about this, she kind of she would ask me questions and it would make me go, oh, okay. And then there was one day in particular, one thing happened. So there used to be this thing called Tea Time with Teal, which was where Teal and a different ex-husband than the one I mentioned a minute ago. There's been a few. Um, yeah, she was sitting with this guy, and the sort of format was that she would be there as someone who knew all about this stuff, and he would be there as sort of a skeptic, and he'd sort of challenge her a little bit, which I think in principle or in theory would have been a nice idea, but she didn't seem to be too comfortable with being challenged, so it wasn't a long-lived series. But it went out to a mailing list, so it was unlisted on YouTube and stuff, and it's disappeared now. It's been wiped from the record, I believe, because the husband, didn't want himself associated with her in any way after they
Right.
broke up. The only thing that's left is a surname of him. That's why she's Swan now and not Scott, which
Right.
is what she
Yeah.
was before. Um, so yeah, we watched that. I think Astrid watched that episode of Tea Time with Teal, and she said to me, "Have you seen the latest Tea Time?" And I was like, "No, I'll have a watch of it." And she goes, "Yeah, okay." And then we talked about it, and she said something in that just didn't sit right with me. And what it was they were talking about the truth of something, some idea, and Teal's ex-husband that was there, he challenged her on it, and she effectively responded. And I'm going from memory now because this isn't extant on the internet, so I might get the word in slightly wrong or something. But she basically said, well, from Source perspective, this is the truth. Source being God and herself being someone who has a direct line to the perspective of Source.
Right.
So she sort of disagreed with him, but used the weight of her access to God's point of view to bolster her claim to truth, basically.
Okay.
And that made Astrid sort of double take and kind of go, hang on a minute. And then we sort of talked about this a little more, and I was thinking another thing that Teal also says about Source is that Source's perspective is all perspectives. Source is sort of is everything. We're all Source incarnated, right? So every perspective is Source's perspective in some sense, right? So there's an inconsistency there. Her point of view is more right on account of it being in alignment with Source's high perspective, and yet his, also Source's perspective, is wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But of course there's levels to it, and you can worm your way out of that with like the sacred science of how this works, but yeah, that sort of struck Astrid, and it struck me and made me start to go, yeah, there's something not right here,
Yeah.
And that was one of the main things. It was me realizing that the law of attraction wasn't working for me, and it was also realizing that my mental health was deteriorating. And Astrid said to me, and it was really Astrid, honestly, that made it possible for me to leave. She was asking me questions, she was listening to me, and she was sort of working through this with me in a way. Said to me, because we'd noticed that my mental health was deteriorating, and I was and my eczema and asthma with that as well. I would say that was connected. My eczema gets worse when I'm stressed and struggling mental health wise. So all of that was flaring up, itching, wheezing, depressed. And Astrid said, "Why don't you just take a few weeks off of shadow work?" Just because I was still doing it, every day at this point. Why don't you just have a break? Stop doing that for a bit and see how you feel. So I did. And then I started to feel better, and I was like, oh, okay. And then shortly after that, I gave up on the law of attraction as well, because I was like, I'm not going to try and control reality with this kind of stuff all the time. Why don't I just go with the flow a little bit more, which again has its own flaws, but it was where I needed to be at that time. So I decided to do that. And throughout that time as well, I was losing faith in Teal, because I started to see from a different point of view. And I started to get quite angry about that, as you would when you realize that you've been duped,
Especially if you wouldn't have had that voice of reason, which in this situation happened to be, somebody that you're now married to, which is a silver lining in amongst all of this nastiness that we're discussing. And I always love it when something really pure comes out of something so difficult, but and it's always important and wholesome for me to hear when people have been supported through their decision to, or encouraged by somebody that loves them and will support them and stick by them, not through conditional appreciation for that person, but through unconditional appreciation for that person, to say like, maybe you just need to take a step back, because if you can't be your voice of reason in that situation, it's so important that you have somebody near you that can do that for you. So that's fantastic that you had that support from your partner to be able to take that step back, and of course you'd be angry.
I mean, I think most people are when they leave a group like this, it takes some time to process that. I've definitely moved on from that mostly now, and I don't feel even half the same way towards Teal or any of this that I used to. But it's a process, isn't it? At the end of the day, people that are leaving they're gonna when you realize, yeah, oh, I've just spent years of my life doing this stuff and making life harder for myself than I needed to, or whatever.
And then there's
Of
that
course, you're gonna be angry.
readjustment period that you have to face as well, you know, and not knowing how long it's going to take to recover from. You know, you said you were doing shadow work every single day. At that point, it's almost an addiction, isn't it? Because it's so ingrained in your everyday routine. Right. How you then have to it's like going to pet a dog that, you know, that sadly passed away. You're like, oh no, they're not there anymore, and you have to remind yourself that that's not part of your daily routine. So I imagine that the prospect of having to reacclimate to things is also quite daunting and difficult as well.
I mean, you know, I mentioned earlier the burden of liberty. I think that for me has been something that even to this day I'm working on. I'm being, I guess, more well adjusted to, because of I mean, I think something that I should say, really, I said I was involved in this in 2012, and I said I moved out of my mum's house around that time as well. I was young when I was involved in this. I'm 27 now. So I must have been, you know, 19, 20 when I was involved in this. 21 when I was leaving, and those years are really important when you're like starting to become, and the sort of entering the phase, you're going from teenager to emerging adult, right? This sort of period where you're starting to take those first steps to independence, starting to become more independent, and it sort of set me back a bit, you know. So I'm still sort of figuring out some things that I hadn't at that time learn, you know. And I reeled for years. Even after leaving Teal, I reeled for a few years and got into other sort of spiritual stuff and lost myself in that too. And yeah, it's taken a long time to start to get to like functioning in a semi normal, healthy way, I think, you know.
Right. Yeah. I just wanted to give a mention to something that I read, which is available for anybody to read. And we were speaking briefly about Stephen Hassan before I started this episode. Anybody that's listened to a number of these episodes will know that it is Stephen Hassan's bite model that I often refer to in terms of, you know, ascertaining the level of control a group might have over its members. So there's been a bite model analysis of Teal, Swan and her content and her followers that you have written. And I believe you wrote it with other members who have also been involved and moved away from her. Is that right?
Yeah, I had some help. I put most of it together myself, but I've had some help from some people who were also involved. Yeah.
It's extremely extensive, and it includes quotes and references and all sorts of pieces of information that you know, it's not just somebody's word of mouth. It's backed up with information and links and stuff. So that's I'll include that in the show description. But it's bitemodelanalysis.wordpress.com/teal-swan. I'll also share that on my social media posts when the episode comes out, in case anybody would be interested in going to read it. It's very interesting and very extensive. But one of the things I read in that bite model is that one of Teal's devout followers was removed from her sort of inner circle after sharing something that that kind of disagreed with Teal's teachings. So if I've got that right, it would appear that there is a lot of information control when it comes to how people speak about Teal and her work.
Yeah, I think if I'm remembering this sort of the same thing that you're talking about there, I think that was someone who was removed from Teal tribe rather than the inner circle for sharing something that was deemed to be something that one of Teal's haters had written. And in this context, haters are, I guess, the equivalent of like Scientology's SP. Like suppressive person. Haters, I would be a hater and I would be an apostate, because I've spoken out against Teal, and I don't like her personally now, apparently, which is reductionist at best. But
I don't think it matters whether you like her personally or not.
no, it doesn't. But well, to us it doesn't matter, but to Teal, I imagine it matters very much.
Right.
But but yeah, it's if I remember in that rightly, what that was someone who shared an article in there of someone that was saying something I think that maybe Teal has disagreed with openly in the past or something along those lines. So in terms of information control, I think one of the obvious obstacles that when you're running sort of an online group like this and you want to control information would be that the internet is just a vast sort of repository of just all kinds of information, right? And you can't control it all. You can't stop people looking at stuff. But what you can do, and I would say that this is something that Teal does do, is disparage things that disagree with what she says, belittle things that disagree with what she says, and again, that sort of ties into when she's talking about things. She'll say, if this is happening in your life, then it can mean that you will get sick with this thing, or if this thing's happening in your life, then it's going to cause this problem. And so it does ramp up the importance of doing and what she's saying, even though she doesn't overtly say do what I'm doing. So, and I think the reason I say that is because talking about the bite model, one of the brilliant ways that Owen Telltale explains this is that if you shut down someone's access to information, they'll start to reach out in other ways. So the bite in bite model, behavior, information, thought, and emotional control, if you try to control someone's access to information, then they'll start to think more critically with the information they have, right? The reason I say that about Teal is that she's, and again, in a way, I would say pulling out the rug from underneath people and getting them to think about the information they do have in certain ways, which means that they tend to agree with what she says and disagree with what other people are saying. So in terms of information control in the group, in terms of thought control in the group, I would say, based on what I've seen, we're looking at people are somewhat allowed to dissent as long as they don't disagree with Teal explicitly.
Right.
And so what, pardon me, a good example is that when someone's talking in there about vaccines, about whether they were going to get the COVID vaccine, I believe someone sent me a screenshot of this. They were talking about COVID vaccines and, are you going to get it? Aren't you going to get it? There was a discussion in the comments there about that. But what would probably happen is if somebody was to post something in the main body of the post in the group explicitly disagree with Teal, then that would be probably attacked by Tealers and possibly taken down. And if this person continues to disagree, continues to be sort of a dissenter, then they may be removed. But again, it's right. They're somewhat patient on that. It's not like, oh, you disagree, you're out. There's an opportunity to come and fall in line, but yeah, from what I've seen, that's the case. So information control is a tricky one though anyway on the internet, but again, like we were mentioning with QAnon, when we it's not so much that they don't have access to other information, it's that the way that they perceive that information has been altered now by what they currently believe.
And it's not policed in any way. It's not fact checked. It's not, I don't know. It's just, you could just go and read somebody's science fiction script and think that they were talking about events that are happening over in Norway, and then take that and run with it and be like, well, you'll never guess what's happened in Norway. There's alien ships over there, and they've come to take the ice. What do they need ice for? That's what it feels like. I'm just gone completely off there, but that's what it feels like to me when I'm reading all of these statements on Reddit about the types of things that people are believing. It feels like they've just gone off and read somebody's like fictional work and come back and said, no, it's
Yeah.
gospel and you cannot change my
Baked
mind.
it.
I will
Yeah.
die before I change my mind. Um, so what do
Yeah.
you think, what has your life been like since you made that decision to stop doing the shadow work, move away from Teal Swan and her work and her practices, and reacclimate to life? Obviously, you've moved now to Mexico. You're with your wife, and
Mm.
what was your journey? Kind of moving away from Teal Swan, and how did you get to where you are now?
I reeled for a couple of years, as I mentioned a minute ago. I ended up getting into other forms of spirituality, watching a lot of Muji, Eckhart Tolle, Ram Dass, these kinds of people, which I wouldn't say are generally particularly harmful, but I think how I would describe that part of my life was that I still had a lot of the shit that I had from before I got into Teal, and then I also now had what I would sort of describe as an orphaned cult identity. I was I'd become cult appropriate. I'd become a Tealer, but now I had no faith in Teal, and I had
Yeah.
no faith in the law of attraction, and I wasn't doing shadow work, but I was still the person that had made me. And so I ended up looking for more answers. So I spent a couple of years, sort of I'd say maybe best part of a year, maybe slightly longer, um, trying to be a spiritual teacher myself. Which during as I was sort of pulling away from Teal, because while I was following Teal, I was trying to work as a coach, which is exactly what anybody who hasn't got their life together should do. Work as a life coach. Fantastic. Um, and so I was trying to do that. And then after I sort of pulled away from Teal, I was like, give myself a promotion, spiritual teacher. And so I did that. I tried to do that. And I say did that. It was made YouTube videos. I think it was on the same channel I use now, actually, but a lot of them are unlisted. I occasionally make a video where I'm like reacting to some of the shit that I used to come out with, and using those videos and stuff, but most of them are unlisted now. Yeah, it was I was, it's still very difficult to be around for quite a while. I realized that now in hindsight. And then after that sort of process happened, I remember being challenged by someone who said that I was like the blind leading the blind, and that was like a wake up moment for me, because it
Right.
was almost like I finally gave myself permission to realize I didn't have a clue what I was talking about and what I was doing, and then I sort of softened on that, and I said, right, well, I'm not going to be a spiritual teacher anymore. Give up that mantle. And then very quickly I was like, maybe I don't feel the need to be a spiritual person anymore either.
Right.
And I think, fast forward a little bit there to only to skip back in a moment, I would say that I'm probably more spiritually inclined than the average sort of atheist or agnostic now, because of I've been through all of this, and obviously I've taken the odd thing here and there that I do like and that has benefited me. But I wouldn't consider myself a spiritual person now.
Okay. Yeah.
But yeah, so I kind of at that point I started like listening to. I remember watching some Richard Dawkins and Ricky Gervais and Brian Cox and these kinds of people, and just listening to the way that they talked about these issues caused me to question a lot of stuff. It really went
Right.
in a different way. And then I found a more skeptical sort of approach, I guess. I probably took me a couple of years to get to the point where I would have said that I was more skeptical in a way that was actually functional for me, rather than just sort of, I don't believe that anymore, I don't believe this anymore, in a way that I could use it to navigate new ideas and deal with stuff in a sort of more practical way. But my life, in terms of how my life is now, how it's improved, I think, as with anybody at the moment with the pandemic and stuff, things are up and down.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
and we're currently between homes because we've had some stuff we needed to sort out where we were living before and all that kind of stuff. But my relationship with my wife and with my family are incredibly good, very strong
Good, amazing.
relationships. We've got 2 cats who drive me up the wall.
Oh wait,
Um,
is one of them called Ned?
Ned,
Is
yeah,
that
Ned and
right?
Tam.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
cult of Ned. I saw your t-shirt in your video and I thought
yeah.
that's awesome. That's so awesome.
Yeah, I mean that goes back to a joke from the channel before because Ned just kept popping up in the videos, and there was one point where he got into the habit during the winter because it was very cold of putting his face into. I had like a lamp behind me in the videos, and he used to just plant his face onto the light bulb, and
Oh,
just because it was warm, he was just like put his face on there and just enjoy that, and then he would pull
oh,
his face away, and you know how cat's eyes like they go very the little the pupils like get very thin, don't they? And
yes,
he
yeah,
just sat
yeah.
there and he just looked like he just dropped acid or something. He was
Oh.
just like, so I put some jokes on there about how that was how he got that's how he got his sort of new spiritual truths by seeing the light, putting his face into the light, and it sort of became a bit of a joke on the channel. And then we made this shirt. Astrid did the art for that.
Yeah, which is
But
just
yeah,
great. Which is that's just like when I saw that, I was like, that's the best merchandise. That's the
yeah. I've
best.
got a new one now as well. Ned pilled, where he's holding 2 red pills. I love it. It's so good.
Ned pilled. That's so clever.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. So
Yeah.
so you've rebuilt your relationships with your family, which is just so good and so important. And you mentioned that
Yeah.
you were on a Zoom call with your family just before we started talking. So obviously, even though you're living
Yeah.
further afield than where they are, you've still got that connection, and that's great. You've got your wife and your 2 cats, so you've got your family there and your support network. And then there's your
Yeah.
channel as well, Andy the Fellows. It's Andy,
Yes.
Andey, for anybody that wants to go and have a look. You've got almost 5,000 subscribers, which is amazing. It just
Yeah.
seems like your content is, as I said before, it's easy to digest. It's super informative, but it comes with that kind of little that's that edge of humor that's not disrespectful in any way, but just keeps it light enough to kind of digest the information without feeling like totally bummed after listening to it and being like, well, that was
Yeah.
super heavy. So Andy the Fellows, definitely for anybody that wants to know more about these types of subjects, which you must do if you're listening. Go and check out that YouTube channel because it's great. I've had a wonderful time leading up to this interview, just listening to some of the content and watching it. I think it was the one on I messaged you about it. Is it
Twin Flames.
Twin
Yeah.
Flames? I was laughing at your false advert at the start of the Twin Flames advert.
Yeah, we do have fun on the channel.
The funniest bit, I was laughing at the bottom where it said excludes true love. I was laughing so hard at that part. It definitely keeps it light, but keeps it informative. So everybody should go and check that out. And I think you're just a testament to the ability to be reeled in through grief and transition into an online movement or group that might have these kind of cult like methods of control or coercive thinking, but come out at the other side of it and be okay, rebuild, and be in a better place than you were before all of those things happened. So I think it's so important for anybody listening who has been affected by these types of online groups that are appearing, to know that there is the potential for family members or for yourself, if you are a person that is kind of involved or wrapped up in something similar to what Andy's described today. There is the opportunity to break away from that and rebuild, and come back to something better. Andy mentioned that that he just had a 2-week break from the shadow work that he was doing and the support from his wife, and was able to then take those small seeds of doubt that started to pop up and run with them, And yeah, I suppose the last question I have, Andy, before we finish, is to ask you if there's any other advice you have for anybody who might be in a similar situation, or have a family member or friend who is in a similar situation to the one that you found yourself in.
I tend to give Stephen Hassan's advice. I try to avoid giving advice. At the beginning, you said I was an expert, and I thank you, but I don't refer to myself as that. I'm gone. I've had an experience, and I'm just trying to sort of share some ideas on this. But so I do try to avoid giving advice. But one thing that I do tend to share from Stephen Hassan is that if you have someone in that situation, or if you're in that situation yourself and you're starting to question it, or you want to sort of maybe leave, try to protect your relationships with the people that you love, that you care about. If you've got someone who's in this kind of a thing, maintain your relationship with them. That's the most important thing, I think, at the base of all of this, because that is what will help. That is what will get them out. As we've said here, for me, it was my wife just being there and listening and trying to understand where I was coming from and asking questions in a non-threatening way. And that's really important. That's another thing Hassan talks about as well, non-threatening questions. I have made a video on how to help someone out of a cult, which is one of the only times I leaned into giving advice. So if you want to hear more from me on that, then that will be the place to go on my channel. Yeah, I think if you just protect your relationship with the person who's in the group, and sort of stay connected with them and talk to them about other things than the group, just lighthearted things that you share, things that you are connected with. And if you're in a group and you're thinking of leaving, lean on the people that you're close to, and just know that it can get better, and that even if you think of life outside the group as scary or never as good as what's inside the group, it can be. It really can be, and it's worth taking that chance, I think, if you are in one of these kinds of groups. Because you won't realize how bad it may have been until you're out and you look back, actually, as well. That's something oftentimes.
That's a great piece of advice. Just take the leap of faith.
Just take a break if you like. I did, just a little bit of time. No commitments to going back, but also no commitments to staying, to leaving. Just I don't want what I'm saying there. No commitments to staying or leaving, but just a short break, maybe.
Fantastic. So I guess all that's left to say, Andy, is thank you so much for your time, for coming here and sharing your story and giving us your experience and allowing us to gain a new perspective on the types of cult-like groups that exist out there. I think this is the first time I've spoken to somebody extensively who's come from sort of more of an online background and perspective, and it's been really exciting to discuss you and your channel and the content that you're creating as well, which I know some people will be extremely thankful for, just advocating and highlighting these things that are potentially dangerous to other people. So thank you so much for your time.
Thanks so much for having me.
Oh no, it's my privilege. I appreciate it so much, and I just really hope that you enjoy the rest of your day.
Yeah, thank you. And
Thanks,
your evening.
Andy. Thank you. You take care. I'll speak to you soon. Bye.
Okie doke. All right. Bye.
That is the end of this week's episode. If you'd like to get in touch, you can do so by following me at cultvaultpod on Twitter and Instagram, or emailing me at cultvaultpodcast@gmail.com. I'm your speaker, Casey, and this has been the Cult Vault.